Hi, my name is Pam Denny. I'm an analytics architect with IBM's Maximo Asset Management product. Today's recording is on the new Dataset Designer application that was introduced with Maximo 7606. In this recording today, it'll be a PowerPoint where we review the new features of the Dataset Designer and the business rules in detail. And then in subsequent recordings, we'll do a demo and we'll actually show you how this functionality all comes together. To set the stage for our presentation today, I want to first highlight that the area that we're going to be focusing on is in the Maximo-x user interface. Maximo-x was introduced in Maximo 7605, and it enables a user to access Maximo seamlessly regardless of the device he's using, whether that's a smartphone, a tablet, a desktop, or a laptop. So within the Maximo-x interface, oops, went a little bit too far there, sorry about that. Maximo-x, as I mentioned, was introduced in 7605, but we're going to look at Maximo-x for 7606, and we're going to specifically focus on the analytic area. Inside our analytic area for Maximo-x, we have a business analyst role-focused work center. We have analytic data sets and integration to Watson Analytics. We also have Watson Storybooks, but again, what we're going to focus on here is the Dataset Designer and the importance it places in enabling us to analyze data. So how is this made possible, and what is the Dataset Designer doing? Well, the Dataset Designer at a very top level enables our Maximo business users to create their own datasets for analysis very quickly, very easily, and very importantly, without IT involvement. Well, who is this Maximo business user that we're talking about? The Maximo business user can have a variety of roles within the Maximo interface, They could be anyone from a business analyst, a planner, a scheduler, a reliability engineer, etc. And the basic requirements is it's a skilled Maximo user, someone who's familiar with the application, someone who's also very knowledgeable of the Maximo fields. This doesn't mean they have to be a SQL or a database expert. We all know the beauty of using Alt-I in Maximo. It basically only means that they have to know knowledge of what fields or individual components that they want to analyze, because it's all about analyzing the data to get the most value out of Maximo. So let's start delving into the details of the Dataset Designer. This is a screenshot of the Dataset Designer, and you're going to see that it's basically an application, again, accessed from within the Maximo-x or the new Maximo user interface. And it's a wizard type application where the user will go through a variety of steps to build their content. The 4 steps, which are shown at the very top of the Dataset Designer, show the progress as our user moves through the creation process. In the first step, they're going to select their object set, configure their content, define the filters, and in the last or the 4th step, they'll actually save the data set so it can be accessed in the future. So let's delve into the details of each one of the 4 components so we can understand the logic and the business rules associated with each. So on the very first page, when the user opens up the Dataset Designer, the first thing they need to do is select an object set to begin working. The object set itself, behind the scenes, is a hierarchy of database tables from which the user selects individual fields for their unique data set. And I have one of those object sets highlighted here. So in this case, you can see it's highlighted in green, and the user gets an overview of what that object set is. In this case, it's an asset details object set where the user can access information not only on the asset, but also associated work orders, spare parts, job plans, and PM information. Behind the scenes, what an object set is a report object structures. And many of you may be familiar with the use of report object structures in Maximo Classic as we utilize them in QBR or ad hoc reporting, Cognos reporting, and also in Maximo 7.6 with result sets. Well, we're going to continue to capitalize on the features and the existing report object structures that you may have created and make them available again as the base or the starting point for our dataset creation. When the user opens up their first dataset page, the report object structures that they will see will vary depending on the security access that they have. And the access is actually set in Maximo Classic Report Admin app. So they will see the report object structures that they have access to. And again, these are the same report object structures that we utilize in many other components in Maximo. If the user wants to see additional information on the report object structure, they can hover over this eye icon or click on it depending on the device that they're using, and they'll see more information. If there's a lot of long description information, it would fully display within this new pop-up card. And they'll also see some more detailed information, when was it created, who last updated it, etc. And that's going to help the user determine which object structure he wants to start with. After the user selects his particular object set or area to focus on, he's automatically brought over to the second page where he's going to configure the content. So now this is where he's going to start to define the individual fields that he wants to display. This is a very, very important page, and it is probably the page where the user will spend the most amount of time. So let me break up its main components. At the very top, we have our navigation. This is the same on all the pages that you'll see. On the far left-hand side are available fields and objects, what the user can select from. On the right-hand side, we have the selected content. So this is where he's selected individual attributes to display. And again, on the bottom, we have some navigation features. So what's happening with the available fields on the far left-hand side? Well, remember again, our object sets are simply our report object structures. So what the user is going to see on the far left-hand side is the same object structure hierarchy that he sees whether he's created the object structure himself or whether he's using QBR, ad hoc reporting, Cognos, or the result sets. He'll see the parent object level and all the children underneath that he can access. Within each one of the object sets, there's a variety of fields, or within each one of the objects, I should say, there's a variety of fields that are available to the user. And the fields for each one of the objects will display an ascending order of attribute name. Just makes it easier for the user to find the individual field he wants to add to his data set. And just like we had on the object sets, there's an eye or an information icon that the user can click on or hover over to, again, get more details. If he needs to validate that this is the field he wants to actually add to his data set, he can simply click on that and find additional information. This information is very, very important, especially if the user is going to take his data and export it to Watson Analytics, because we want to make sure that the data type itself is optimized for data analysis. Another feature is available on the bottom of the object set, and that's a hover, it's not a hover, I'm sorry. It's a, oh gosh, I can't remember what type of field this is. But anyways, toggle, excuse me. So it's a toggle field, and you can toggle back and forth to show, hey, I want to see all the required fields within an object, or I want to see all the fields. Why is this toggle so important? And oh my goodness, the name is right up here. But anyways, why is this toggle so important? It's so important because I may not want to add a lot of fields to my analysis that are optional fields, because if they're optional fields, my user may actually not be filling them in, so there won't be anything for me to analyze. So again, oftentimes you want to have this field toggled on, so you're only looking at required fields, because then you're ensured that data will be populated for those required fields. So that's a really nice feature that's available. All right, so we have these fields. How do we get them over into our selected field section? Well, there's 3 ways that you can do that. You can simply double click on a field, you can drag it and drop it, or you could highlight a selected number of fields and click Add to get those fields directly added over. It's important to note that if you are rapidly adding fields and maybe you double click on the same field once, we are only going to, or more than once, we are only going to add it to the selected field at one time. So example, maybe here I already have asset number added, but I come back up here and I add it again and again just because I forgot or I have a large number of fields. Again, we will only add the field once and no message or annoying pop-up will show you that. Another way that you can quickly add fields is through a search. In this case, you come up in the search field or up here right above the available object set and you put in your text value. And what will happen is you'll see for any of the objects within your hierarchy, you will see each one of the fields that are available. So in the example, I put in a search field or a search value of date. It looks through my entire hierarchy and shows me the objects and the attributes that have a date value in them. Really nice functionality when you're going ahead and searching. In the other case, you may be searching for a value, but there is no attribute value for that search in the parent object. So in this case, I put in a text value of work type, but there's no work type in my parent of asset details. Well, what you'll see is that no records will display in that parent level, but the child objects that have that value will still display. And the reason we do this is we still need to maintain our hierarchy. We don't want to just show PM and work orders because you may start to lose what level of the hierarchy that you are on. So again, we purposely always retain that parent object level so you can understand where you are. A couple other important points about your selected field. So again, once you've added values over to the right-hand columns, what you actually want to analyze is over here on the very top is a reset. A reset will wipe out or remove all of your selected fields. Within any field that you've added, there's individual actions. The I, just like our object sets and our available fields, will give you more information on that attribute. You can delete that individual attribute or you can edit it. And when you edit a field, you're basically going to override the label value. You may want to do this to make it a label value you more easily recognize in Watson Analytics or a CSV file, or to make it more user-friendly. So again, what you're editing is actually the label value of the attribute. And then these arrow keys on this side right here will actually change the order of the fields. If you want to move priority above description or you want to take priority and move it as your last field, you'll utilize these navigation arrows to do that. A couple other important notes to see about or to recognize with the selected field. There is a limit on the number of fields that has been set. So if you wanted to add all 200 fields from work order tracking and 500 fields from all the other objects in your hierarchy, you will reach a limit and you will get a message there that tells you the limit has been reached. Excuse me. A few other important notes on this section. Again, remember the content is where the user is going to be spending the most amount of time. Is on the bottom here, you might want to apply a sort. So again, imagine that you have a large number of fields. Maybe you want to sort those fields by site or priority or manufacturer as shown down here. It's very important to note that the sort can only be applied at attributes from the parent object. If you had, in this case, we have data from asset, and I had tried to sort on data from work order, I would receive a message that I can't sort on attributes from child objects. And again, you can add what fields you want in the sort area, the 3 same ways that we add from the available to selected field section. And the default order of the fields is ascending order. And there's a tiny little icon. I just didn't seem to get it here on the screenshot, but there's a tiny little icon on each one of these rows, and that will toggle it again back and forth between ascending and descending order, ascending and descending order. Also within the content, this is a very, very important feature, is the preview functionality. Preview enables you to validate that the fields you have selected are correct. So if you click on the preview, we're going to go out, grab 10 rows of data only, and display them back to you so you can start to see, yes, this is the information I want to see, my asset number, my description, failure class, location, whatever you may have selected. Again, this preview functionality will enable that validation. A few other business rules that I want to highlight is that you are only able to create a data set from a single object set. If you have selected an object set and added a number of fields within your configure content section, and you then go back and try to change, you're going to see a warning message. And that warning message is basically telling you, hey, we can't take fields from multiple object sets. You need to either stick with the one you have, or if you're changing it, we're going to have to wipe everything out for you to start all over again. So this was again, configure content. That's a very, very important section. The last 2 sections over here on the right is where the user is going to define his filters and then actually save the content. So let's go in and talk about the define filters page. And this is going to be, again, a very, very important page for us. What happens with the define filters is over here on the far left, you're going to see a number of queries that are already available to you. These queries can come from 2 places. They can come from the application. So it's going to be the application that the parent object is registered to. So in this case, it looks like we have a purchasing object set. So I'm going to see any queries associated with my Maximo Classic purchasing application. And I'm also going to see any queries that I may have already created associated to, again, that same object set. So that's really nice. Again, we're making it easy for you to capitalize on those existing queries. So you can toggle here between whatever's available to you and utilize them, and you'll define them in this top section, or you can utilize a new query. So maybe what you have isn't applicable, you want to type in something new, you can go ahead and do that. And for the first time, we are enabling a test query functionality that will validate the SQL of your filter or your where clause. So again, the existing queries are coming from 2 places. In this case, purchase order. So we're going out to PO application and bringing over those existing queries. In the other location up here, which you'll always see identified by analytic data sets, are the queries that are associated with any data sets that you've already created. And then down here in the new query section, this is where you're going to come in and create something totally new. You can also do some copy and pasting. If, say, you wanted this existing one, but you wanted to modify it a little bit, just copy it over here, paste it down here in the new query section, and make any SQL adjustments that you need. There's quite a few rules surrounding a query, as you can imagine, because they are so important and they're impacting the amount of data and the type of data that displays. So the top ones to remember is you have to have a query with your data set. We do not want the users running against all records in the database. So again, we must apply a query to the data set. Once you apply them, or you actually save them, that query will then be available for other data sets. Okay, so we're reusing that functionality and making it available for you over and over again. You always have to use proper syntax, and that's why we have that test query functionality. And that test query functionality will be executed always behind the scenes, even if you don't actually click on the button. The querent parent object is the parent object of the data set. So we have shown a PO object set. So our PO is always that parent object and what you need to start with. And then again, if you're looking at the preview functionality from the filter window, any new where clause or filter that you create will not be applied to the preview. The preview is only going to be using the existing query. And that's because we haven't saved anything yet. So because we haven't saved it, we're not able to apply it to the preview. Couple other important notes. You can use a bind variable with any new query that you create. And there's examples of some bind queries up here. And these are very, very popular. I wanted to highlight the best or the recommended approach. You can see over here that there's a variety of ways that you can create bind variables, but we've validated this with our performance folks, and they always recommend that you use the colon in front of your variable. Again, that's the recommended best practice for creating any SQL variable any SQL query with a bind variable. The test query, again, very, very important, especially if you're creating a filter that may be very, very complex. I know I always leave out apostrophes, parentheses, whatever, commas. I always make a mistake. I'm always in a hurry. So it's so important that we have this test query functionality so we don't have any bad running queries. And so again, what that's going to do is it's going to test that we can get a valid URL. You can see in the example here, I just put in some simple text and it gives me a message that it does not approve that. It's not a valid SQL query, Pam. You got to make sure you're going to go ahead and fix it. And that's really important because if I didn't fix that, it's not going to let me save my data set. Data set must be created with a correctly formed SQL statement. So the values, when you test the query, what are the outcomes? First, great job. Your query is valid. You're going to get a message on the top of the screen. Second, your query is not valid. You're going to go ahead and get this message. And the third, which is really interesting, is if we find that your query is taking a long time to run. So we're going to go ahead and give you a message because this is also very, very important. Is this really what you want? So this is the message that you will see. And again, we're going to show you that when you have a very long running SQL because that is not the intention here. Our intention is to create data sets that can be quickly executed without any negative performance impacts. Couple other key business rules to remember about the test query. Again, we're not able to save your data set if the query is not valid or it takes too long to run. And again, if you don't test your SQL and you create a new SQL, we're going to go ahead and make sure we test that for you. We do the same functionality with QBR ad hoc reporting. We do this behind the scenes. Again, it just ensures that we make sure that we create a data set that can be executed. Really, really important information there. So just a couple of more slides to bring this home. The last component that we have in our dataset designer is the ability to save. Save is very, very important because what this is going to do is it's going to give your dataset a name, which you can then see within your dataset library on the Work Center from Maximo, and it also gives it a description. We're all very, very busy, right? And oftentimes we create things with files and information and we're not really sure what we've done. So make sure you give this a description. Give it a description that you and other people can identify and recognize so they know what content is in there and that they want to interact with that content. Once you've done that, so you've given it a name and you've given it a description, there's a number of different actions that you can take. And these actions are all listed within this dialog here. Well, let's look at the details associated with each one of these. If I come over here and say, okay, I want to create a new data set, that's going to take me back to page 1 of my dataset designer, and I can start creating a brand new data set. That's something that I may often want to do. The other thing that I may automatically want to do is download my contents to CSV. So that, again, very, very important. Take that information that I've created, put it into CSV so that I can analyze that content. few other things that are available is I can take that and automatically export it to Watson. What this will do is it'll take my data set and it'll push it over into my configured Watson account. And then I'm going to be able to see it in Watson as a new data set. It's going to be identified to me with my name and then a random number at the end, along with the date and time that I published it. Excuse me. And then another thing that I can do is edit it. Maybe I saved it, and then as I'm saving it, I'm realizing, oh darn, I forgot to add a column, or I forgot to add a sort order, or I applied the wrong query. Whatever it is, you can go ahead and bring it back to the edit, and it's not going to bring you to the first page where you select your object set. It's going to bring you to the second page where you've spent all the time configuring your content. Just a few other notes here. Just want to highlight, again, when you export it to Watson Analytics, it's going to create that individual data set or data component. Once it's there, you can refine your data, review your quality scores. You can then start to use Watson Analytics natural language processing to discover insights on your data, and then you can create dashboards and infographics, etc. Here's a few more examples of how we took our asset org data and then we brought it over in CSV format and over here into Watson. So again, what we've showed here is the complete cycle from starting with this new dataset designer. We can access it here either from the data library or from our menu. And after we create, go through the 4 steps of selecting the object set, selecting the content, defining the filter, and saving it. It's then available within your dataset library. With Maximo 7606, we do deliver 7 object sets out of the box, or we deliver 7 data sets out of the box for your library, but you can quickly build your own, again, to get the information that you need to best analyze your Maximo data. And the last thing I want to highlight is that we have added a number of new objects to support this functionality. Again, this may or may not be important to you, but we do want to highlight that everything right now for our data sets is held within this new object. He's our master or home object called the analytic data set. And we're pulling from a number of different objects down here for all the information on our report object structures, and also over here for our information on our individual attributes. So with that, I'd like to thank you very, very much for your time. Again, this was an introduction to the new Dataset Designer, which is, where's our Dataset Designer? Let me quick show you that. Go back home here. Our new Dataset Designer, we reviewed the 4 individual features or the 4 components of the Dataset Designer. So again, thank you very much.